Hi, everyone. This is Shauna with Jeffco PTA. We are so glad to be here with you today. So it's our last class of our first day of fall conference. And today our special guest is John McDonald. He's the Executive Director of the Department of School Safety for Jeffco Public Schools. And John is known nationally, so he fills a room and usually has our classes fill up to capacity because he is such a great speaker, such a great partner actually with law enforcement. But more importantly, John is a very exceptional partner with parents and families in our schools. So we're so grateful to have you today, John. Please unmute yourself. You're a host. Let me know how we can help you. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Whenever Shauna tells me I have to speak, I just speak. It's kind of a given.
It's the way it should be, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Are you ready for me to share my screen?
Absolutely. Go for it.
Right.
We want your knowledge.
Let me know when you can see this.
We got it.
Right. Well, I thought I'd do something a little different. The world changed for all of us at the same time, and we've all been going through a crisis together. And by my reckoning, it's the longest single crisis in world history in the last 100 years. And it's not ending, unfortunately, as soon as we'd like. So we're left with how do we manage it? And how we manage crisis, I think dovetails a lot into what we're seeing in the Corona world with what we've seen in the school safety world for more than 20 years. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to give you an insider look into the world of Jeffco and what we've been through, because there's a lot of mystery and sometimes, frankly, confusion about what the heck are we doing? And I want to kind of dispel some of this and also help you understand the complexity of what we've had to go through. And then I'm going to dovetail into a new program that we tried to start right before Corona hit us. And we're going to pick back up as soon as we can. So with that, as Shauna said, my name is John McDonald. I've been around a long, long time. I'm like the old man on the mountain right now. So I give wise, sage advice. And if I don't like it, I'm at the point where it's okay. I don't care. I still give them the advice. And, we're fortunate that we have a very experienced team in Jeffco that understands how to manage crisis. And I've been fortunate to have been around a long time. In fact, I don't think there's a single student in Jeffco that was in school before I've been here. So, we are in uncertain times. There is no doubt about it. The 2020-2021 school year is filled with angst and uncertainty. And I've heard people call it the lost year. I refuse to believe it's a lost year, but it is uncertain. We can manage through uncertainty though. And we've been doing that for a very long time. Educational systems, they thrive on consistency. So right now, we have an inconsistent process, an inconsistent system across the country. We have it here in Jeffco, and we are trying to navigate this thing, and it is big and complex. And the challenge for us is, we're trying to appease everybody and make sure that everybody not only has a voice, but we want everybody to feel safe in their decision making and their ability to make good decisions for their families and their kids. So now we have this complex system happening in the middle of chaos, in the middle of crisis, and how do we manage through that? Now, March 12th, 2020, I took this picture. This picture was the first stand-up meeting of the COVID response team for Jeffco schools. And think about that for just a moment. Look at how we were all sitting. This is before we had social distancing commentary happening in the media. We knew this was coming. We knew that this was going to be a national thing. We knew that we had to get ahead of it and we had to start talking about it, and we had to start making some decisions for what we thought was going to happen, maybe within weeks. Well, it happened within about a day from the time we stood this meeting up. And our world looked a lot different, as I'll show you in a minute, following this meeting. Something happened though. I walked in the meeting looking like this. And my first words to Superintendent Glass were, I don't know anything about a pandemic. I'm not the incident commander this time. I tell everybody around the country when I train on crisis management that we have to check our egos at the door. We have to be willing to say, not me, here's someone else that has much more experience and understands this situation. If it is a threat, if it is a school shooter, if it's a flood, if it's a tornado, if we ever have a hurricane, I'm good at managing all of that. But to be perfectly honest, managing a pandemic is something new and we've never dealt with it. But I knew who to go to. I went to Julie Wilkin. You'll see her circled in red, your lower right-hand screen. And Julie is our Director of Health Services. And what was so fascinating is that when she started in her position well over a year and a half ago now, 2 years ago, we sat down and I handed her a pandemic plan that was created in the district back in 2008 for the bird flu. And I said, this is all we got. And she said, oh, this will be fixed. So she took this little bitty plan, created a pandemic plan over the course of last year and a half. When COVID hit the country and schools were shutting down, Dr. Glass and I were receiving calls from school districts around the country asking if they could use our Jeffco pandemic plan because what she created was really good and relevant and spot on. And that was really important for us and how we successfully have navigated through this. But it also, once again, put Jeffco on the map as a district that takes school safety seriously. And I think that's really important. So it's not always about us. It's not always about our Department of School Safety. It's not always about, the executive leadership. There are people out there amongst us that have subject matter expertise that we need to draw on each and every day. And we found a gem in Julie. Just fascinating in the relationships that she's been able to develop with Jeffco Public Health and the state, and understanding the CDC and the way that the federal government looks at the world. I don't know anybody understands that, but she gets it. And it's really important during this crazy time that we're in. This was March 13th, 2020. So you go back a couple slides and you think about how we were all positioned. This is how we walked in. And this became our new normal for that one day until Julie told us, you're still too close together. We can't do this. We have to start doing video conferencing, and then Zoom became our life. And you all know what this was like in the spring. I don't have to tell you. I decided to grow a full beard and look like Rip Van Winkle. It was, everybody was at home. And fortunately, through technology, we were able to do some pretty remarkable things. Now, March 14th, you may remember this. I took this picture at Target, and how fascinating. I don't think anybody in the country will ever be unprepared with paper products again in their life. This is reminiscent of what people were going through in World War II. and World War I when we had rationing. So now we're in a new world, and we've got to make some decisions as a district in terms of how we're going to educate kids, how we're going to feed kids, how we're going to support students in crisis, and what do we do for our staff. And all of that really meant that first and foremost, we had to stay safe ourselves. So I set up kitchen table command center at my house. And this is how we worked. And it was pretty remarkable what we can do today, because I'll tell you, even 8, 9 years ago, 5 years ago, I don't think we could have done any of this. So the rapid advancement of technology has certainly been something that has really helped us. We would have been limited to a phone conference call in the past. It is really important during any crisis event, and you probably all notice this, when you can see somebody face to face and you can see the expressions on their face and you can see the mannerisms, it changes how you communicate and interact. And that's so important during times of crisis, because when you miss those nuances, you're making decisions in a vacuum, and sometimes they're not the best of decisions. So this really, as much as I hated Zoom, because we were on calls, Zoom calls, 7 hours a day with the cabinet COVID response team. And I'm sure, like me, all of you were hurting. You'd stand up and you felt so stiff you couldn't even move. And we shouldn't complain, because we were keeping people safe, and that was the most important thing. The challenge for us throughout this whole process is looking at each other saying, wait a minute, what did they say? Who said this? And we would make decisions based on guidance that we got from the feds, or guidance that we got from the state, or guidance that we got from county health. And then somebody else would change their mind. Or we'd have a new study that would come out saying everything you're doing is wrong. And we couldn't message fast enough. We had to do a timeout and say, hold up here. Where are we getting our information from? Who are we going to follow? And, everything else has to be minutia, because you can only focus on one aspect of a critical event and information flow like this and decision making. We really needed to have that figured out. And to be honest, in a crisis this large that impacts the entire country, there's not a system that's going to be perfect. So we just have to work through it. And just like everybody else, we fought through this. Now, I think this is also where a lot of frustration came in for parents. And I completely get it. That communication we were putting out, sometimes it felt like every day it was changing. And I think our community at times was saying, time out, hold up. What are you talking about? What are we doing? What's the plan? Just tell us what we're going to do. And we were in a no-win position, because, we would make a decision at 6 o'clock at night, and 7 o'clock in the morning, we'd get a report saying, you got to change it. It's got to be different. Or we're seeing something new with COVID, or, we have this new complexity in place. And, one of the things that I recall so clearly was that while we were learning a lot of lessons and we were rapidly trying to adjust to that, we were one of the first districts in the country, first large district in the country, to move from in-person learning to remote learning. And that's a big, big lift. Now, there had been a lot of thought process for several years in one-to-one devices, making sure that students had the right devices so that they could work from home or they could work from school and really move into this technological world. But then the big question became, what are we going to do for all those kids that don't have internet? How many hotspots can we get out? Can we set up community hotspots? Can we go park vehicles and have neighborhood hotspots? In the end, we were getting hotspots directly to their home. And because of our infrastructure and the relationships in our IT department and the focus that they were putting on the technology side, we were really far ahead of the rest of the area and frankly the country. And it's always exciting. I like being knocking down doors and stuff following. And I called it Jeffco fast because we really were. I mean, we went from a very quick turnaround over a weekend from in-person learning to remote learning. And it wasn't always smooth. Believe me, I'm not going to claim that. We had a lot of struggles with it, frankly. I felt bad for teachers. How do you now transition in a world of in-person learning to a world of, remote learning where your kids are standing on their heads on their bed, jumping around while you're trying to teach? The whole thing's a challenge. And I think we're going to look back at this. And, Dr. Glass had said this at the time. He said, I think this is our opportunity, if we choose to take it, to redefine what education looks like in this country. And I've thought a lot about that over the last couple of months, and I really believe that it is true. You have, I think, moments of time, certain events occur where you can make real change and look at new opportunities and direction and what you want to do, and what you want to become, and how you're going to take care of your customers. In our case, that's our kids and our families. So there's a lot that goes into that, and I don't pretend to understand all of it because I'm a crisis manager and my world is school safety. And I'm the first to say, when it comes to educational decisions, I never raise my hand unless it has something to do with school safety. I stay in my own lane, and I don't pretend to understand what a teacher goes through, what a principal goes through. I just know how a crisis needs to be managed and what we will go through as a community together. And that's the advice I can offer. But what I would say is that, having observed this and talking to my counterparts all over the country, I'm really proud of the fact that we were so far ahead and really making robust decisions that were having significant positive impact. And other districts are coming to us from around the country saying, what are you doing? Do you mind if we take this model? Can we have your plan? Absolutely. We're here to share and help and give hope throughout this process. So, and we did the same thing, frankly. There was stuff that other districts were doing that we were calling them saying, hey, we need to talk. You're doing something that we've not seen and we want to understand it. I think that just benefits all of us as a community. One of the big questions that we were faced with is, how do we feed our kids? We have a significant number of students that have needs that their only good meal of the day is when they come to school in the morning and have lunch. And the decision from Dr. Glass and Cabinet at that time was feed everyone. And I remember saying, wait a minute, don't you mean just feed those that, we know are in need of the food? And, the response from Cabinet, which I thought was pretty remarkable, because what we were told very quickly is that the feds have said we need to help feeding the community, and we need schools to step up and help become those feeding sites. So we had thousands of cars every week coming through our schools. We had designated food spots set up. Our nurses were out there, our Department of School Safety patrol people, our campus security personnel, even our SROs would come out. Our kitchen and food service people were frankly amazing in how many meals they made on the spot. And then we had a whole robust process of, make the meal, put the meal on a cart, somebody in full PPE wheels the cart out, open your trunk. We have somebody in PPE putting the meal in the trunk. We tried to do it all right. And I'll tell you, it's not inexpensive to do it right. It's a big lift. We spent millions of dollars on PPE and food, and I don't know what point we'll get reimbursed. I think at some point we've been reimbursed for some of it, but there's a lot of promises out there towards school districts right now, and I'll look forward to seeing the day when if we're made whole. But I would say this: I think what we did though was we helped keep the community whole, and as an organization, that's what we should be doing. That's the good work, I think, of school district or government, is how do we help in times of crisis? Now, you all saw this with me. It felt like when you were driving down the street, you were very alone out there. It's remarkable. In places like 6th Avenue in the morning, there was no traffic. What a treat until you really thought about why there was no traffic. And the essential personnel, really became critical component. And we were asked to designate essential personnel throughout the district. And sometimes it's not the essential personnel that you think it's going to be. And in our case, it was really food service people. It was, custodians, school safety, nurses. Those really became the essential personnel that we needed out and about in the schools. And I got to go back to our nurses. They were frankly amazing, and they still are each and every day. About a year ago, I met with Julie Wilkin, our Director of Health Services, and I said, I want to work with you to create a nurse response team. And we invested heavily into the nurse response team. And our nurses today have the capability of an EMT and can respond as an EMT. They have the ability to work with fire and law enforcement during critical events. They work with our team. And in fact, we just had a life-saving event at one of our high schools the other day where a student stopped breathing. And one of our amazing nurses, our school resource officer, did CPR until they brought the student back. And fortunately, they had the equipment and the technology and the training to do that. But that's an investment that the district has made into our schools based on things like the bond and mill levy over the last couple of years. Well, I can point to a direct life-saving event that we were able to accomplish, and as a young student is alive today because of our community stepping up and saying, yes, we believe in the world of school safety and ensuring that everybody has a nurse. And we have this nurse response team and school resource officers. So that student's not the only one, but we can certainly point to that issue this last week and say that's a success. Throughout this whole COVID issue, we were receiving a lot of safe to tells, not as many as we typically would get. I'll talk about that in just a minute and what I've come to realize. But safe to tell became a lifeline for a lot of students that had no one else to talk to, and they didn't know where else to go. And initially, we were responding with law enforcement to a lot of safe to tells. It really dwindled down over time, though. Now, as school has moved back in session, the safe to tell numbers have started to pick back up again pretty significantly. And, it begs the question, where are the stressors in the child's life? What is causing the stress to occur where they feel like, they need that help and that hope? And most safe to tell reports, as many of you know, are not from the students. They're from their friends or from the bystander that sees them in crisis, that sees them struggling and reaches out and is a good friend and is helping them. Well, without that connection, without that face-to-face, person-to-person connection, I think we've lost some of that over the last few months in the number of kids that were reporting concerns about their friends. Now that they're back in school and they see their friends and they see the crisis that they're going through, now they're reporting again. So, we've got to pay attention to this program. It's still, I think, the most important intel tool schools will have, and it's in Colorado. Other states around the country are trying to model this, some more successfully than others, but the model keeps coming back to Colorado. And I believe I heard now we've had over 18,000 tips since the inception of this program. It's just remarkable. So we're really promoting the use of Safe to Tell again. Not that we stopped, but now we've got kids back in our clutches, and they're hanging out with us day in and day out, and we're reminding them that we're here for them. And it's an important message. By April, it was really clear that we're not going to have graduations. And that was pretty devastating. We had a lot of kids, a lot of seniors and parents struggling with that. We struggled with it. We had a lot of conversations, and the decision by cabinet was, look, we've got to do something. We've got to have a graduation for these students. We have to be able to give them that honor and dignity and say goodbye somehow. Well, we were tasked, Jeff Pearson, our Director of Safe School Environments, Julie Wilkin, Director of Health Services, Bruce Huxley, who's a Director of Facilities, and myself, with coming up with the plan and management oversight for 20 graduations in 11 days in August. Not that it was going to be hot or anything, but it was the only time we could do it. The only time we could get public health to sign off on it. It's a big lift to create a plan. Then you have to take it to public health and make sure that they're okay with it. And then they were coming out and they were actually observing us and making sure that we were in compliance with what we said we were going to do. And it was on the heels of the whole debacle with the Bandemere event. So public health was not in a playing around mood. And they wanted to know that we were going to follow the rules. And we got all these kids that want to give each other hugs because they haven't seen each other and they're not graduating, and we're keeping them 6 feet apart from each other. But I will say that it really was done well. It went off without a hitch, or, well, there were a few hitches, but it went off without big hitches. Our schools accomplished what they wanted to. They were able to say goodbye to the seniors. The seniors, for the most part, were able to be part of the graduation with some exceptions. And it was really important that we do this. And I think, one of our mantras, at least in our Department of School Safety, has become find ways to say yes. Everybody says no, let's be different. Let's say yes every once in a while. So it really becomes, what can we do to create an environment where something is allowed? And that's challenging in a world where right now it's no. So in 6 months, we've learned a lot. It feels like we've been studying a lot of math to try and figure all this out. And I got to be honest, my head hurts at the end of every day. That's just a lot of conversations. And sometimes we repeat the conversations because it takes a long time to make decisions for a system our size and for the amount of students and staff involved and the amount of community members. So one of the great things we learned is that if we look at COVID, as we look at our threat management program, it really comes down to these two things: accountability and active monitoring. And COVID, or a threat to a violence of some sort, it's still the same thing. It's accountability and active monitoring. And let me give you just kind of a moment to see what I'm talking about here. when we manage threats, if we have a student making a threat, we create a safety plan. We may start out with checking in with staff. We may decide to search the student every day when they come to school. We're going to restrict their movement. We may give them assigned seating. We may have lunch and restroom restrictions. If it's bad, so really, a scary threat, it may come down to suspension or potentially arrest. And then you look at COVID. What are we doing? Everybody that walks in the door, we're checking in with staff. Instead of a search of student, we're doing a temperature check. We're restricting movement, we're assigned seating, lunch and restroom restrictions, and then instead of suspension, it's remote learning. Instead of it's arrest, it's isolation, meaning you're quarantined. So by looking at this, it's a little easier to manage because, in all honesty, we've been managing threats of violence for over 20 years all over the country surrounding schools. We know how to do that. So we just move the dial a little bit, change the focus. Now, what's really important here is we can't forget about the students that are making a threat. That will continue. That's not going to go away. It just means we have more to manage now. And it's something we have to keep on our radar. And now we've got COVID and we have a student making a threat. Well, we're managing both right now. And I'll be honest, it takes a lot. Not an easy process, but it's what we do. What we've learned is that the impact of even our smallest decisions is going to have an impact to the entire community. And I think we've learned that over the last several months, and we're very cautious today. Before we put messaging out, we're having more conversations than ever before. What are we trying to message and why are we messaging it? And what is the purpose behind it? And let's try to reduce that messaging a little bit and give people really what they need versus just a scatter approach and give them everything that is out there, because it gets overwhelming. And frankly, most of you don't read all of it anyway. I know I don't. It's too much to read. So let's actually do the stuff we can control and put the stuff in effect and share the information that you really want to know. We've also learned that critical decisions really demand an honest self-assessment. If we're not checking ourselves and asking a fundamental question, is it safe to do? Then we're going to get ourselves in a position where we're going to have more risk of COVID. We're going to have more students and staff that'll get the virus and pass it on. So we always have to ask this fundamental question. We were just asked a question the other day about homecoming. Can we have homecoming events? Homecoming by its mere nature is not exactly a social distancing event. And Jefferson County Public Health doesn't allow more than 125 people gathering in any one spot. How do we have homecoming? So big conversations surrounding this type of stuff right now. And it's going to continue like that through the year. And part of the self-check, we really owe it, I think, to students and staff to do this. If we don't do this, then we're doing everybody a disservice. And we're making decisions in a vacuum. And we're making decisions without understanding the impact to community. And we just can't get into that environment because nobody wins in that case. One of the things we learned, frankly, is consistency. Can we sustain the expectations we're setting? Because if you can't, then we got to stop right where we're at and figure out what we can do to create consistency through the process and the program and the system. I can't have Arvada West doing something completely different than Stanley Lake, from Ralston Valley to Dakota Ridge and up to Evergreen. It's got to be a consistent process. Otherwise, we get beat up by everybody saying, wait a second, that school's letting us do this. Why aren't you letting us do that? So that's one of our challenges that we've learned. This is probably the most fundamental thing we have to ask when it comes to the educational side is, what does effective learning look like? And if we return to school, this was one of the questions we asked all summer when we didn't know if we were going to be able to return. Will returning be more disruptive to the learning? Will returning be less safe? Will returning have too much risk? Will we have enough PPE for a learning environment? Can we sustain it? So we have to ask this question all the time. What are we going to get the most effective learning for? And I think what we came down to is a really good balance where we're letting parents make a decision with their kids about how they want to attend school, online school versus in person. The AB model had a lot to do with cohorting, and all these words we never even thought about 6 months ago, we're living with today. I'm hoping someday we can forget them all, but for now, that won't happen. In the end, all the planning that we're doing leads to an uncertain COVID road. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know what this fall is going to look like. We don't know what this winter is going to look like. We have to be prepared for both. And we are having those conversations. I believe that this year may be a year of pivoting. We may find ourselves, depending on the school, in and out of school, remote to back to in person, depending on what we're seeing from COVID numbers. And we just have to be aware of that. And by being aware of it and by being prepared for it, now we can transition as we need to a lot faster, more effectively, and then get back into school as soon as it's healthy to do so. And I guess for all of us in cabinet, I think the thing that we really have come to understand is all of this requires transparency, because it is about trust. It's about trust with community. It's about trust with our employees. It's about trust with our kids. And if you don't have that, you're just going to fail every single time. So we have to continue working. This is a never-ending bridge that we have to keep working at, I believe. And it's not just during COVID. I think it's every day of your career when you're with Jeffco or any other organization. We owe that to our community. And sometimes this is hard because we're making decisions quickly with the best information that we have. And, and people are struggling trying to understand why. And that's the challenge. So we're in a new normal. I don't know for how long. Maybe a semester, maybe a year. Is it a lot longer? I don't know. What I do know is that we will manage this crisis like we have all others, and we'll continue to work at it. And the goal is keep everybody safe. And we're seeing the challenges that college environments are having. So we're really trying to create environments and reminders for our high school kids, especially. Don't find yourselves in positions where you're doing what the college kids are doing. Stick with your group, and that's tough to do when you're that age. We have met a lot as a COVID response team, and the only days we've taken off are weekends, some weekend days, Sundays primarily, and the 3rd of July. Other than that, even on vacation, our team members, wherever they're at around the country, get on that Zoom call and meet and then get with their own teams and meet. I don't think anybody's had, I gotta be honest, a full day off since March 13th. I just don't think it's happened. And I don't think it will happen. It's gonna continue because we gotta get this right. So with all of that said, I wanna thank you for your patience and the grace as we try to figure this out. It's a big, big lift. I want to end with a couple of thoughts because right before COVID hit, I had this really cool new idea that I approached Shauna and John about, and I said, I want to create a Jeffco PTA crisis response team. I really believe, and I still believe this, that our greatest opportunity in the future for managing crisis events is if we have strong partnerships where we can rely on the PTA as a mission partner in community safety and school safety and working with us in the aftermath of crisis events. Now, what I'd say is, I don't know if any of you are contagious, so I don't want to see you in person right now as a crisis response team, but I do have plans to set up our first virtual crisis response team training, and I'll be working with Shauna on that in the next couple of weeks. If you are interested, we're going to start moving forward with this because, as we said earlier, the threats that we face are not just COVID related. We're always going to have issues in our community. There's too many things happening right now in the world to think that we're not going to need support and help. And who better than a group of people with such a vested interest in protecting our kids? So this is still in the works. We got a lot of mama bears out there. They're fierce creatures. There's no more fierce creature in the world. And we've still got a lot of watchdog dads out there that are hyper vigilant and protecting the families. And we want that partnership. So have thoughts about how we're going to do that. We're going to roll that out. More to follow in the coming months on how you can be part of this team. And I want to thank you all for your time today. If you ever have any questions, please give me a call. That's my office number. I will tell you that it gets filled up with vendor calls every day and a half right now. People trying to sell me PPE or the latest and greatest in body scanners that can, read a temperature from 500 feet away. That I'm pretty sure doesn't work, but they keep calling. So please feel free to call with any questions. And thanks for the time and happy to answer any questions.
If anybody wants to participate, am I frozen again?
You're okay now.
Can you hear me? Anyone?
You're okay now.
Yeah, can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, this is fun. Okay, good. If anybody wants to participate in that crisis response team, we have some requirements you have to meet, and you should email president@jeffcopta.org so that we can help you through that. You're also going to need to take a suicide prevention training. We've been still offering that through the pandemic, and we will continue to do that as long as I'm in office, and as long as I'm sure the next administration for Jeffco PTA would like me to do so. I will be here to do that and do it for free for any PTAs or groups or book clubs or whatever. You can find all that on our website. Lastly, though, John, I just want to thank you. You are one of the few people who regularly remembers parents and actually actively advocates for us and for us having a voice. And I also want to send everybody to Safe and Sound Schools. Actually did some videos this summer, and you can find them safeandsoundschools.org. Michelle Gay did a video with John actually about that communication and transparency piece. And boy, if every school district had listened to John about his recommendations, things would have been so much more smooth for all of us. For our staff members, and we do have staff members on this call as well, huge appreciation and thanks to all of you. I do think nobody really had a summer this year. And I know our principals were answering emails all summer long, so they really didn't take time off either because they were trying to make us feel better as parents. And John, I'm probably partially guilty for your busy inbox. So, because I have no problem sending people to you on a regular basis.
I've noticed that.
Yeah, no, sorry. Anybody have any other questions for John?
Well, thank you all.
I would like, go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you.
Thank you. I would like everybody to go to the Safe and Sound Schools website as well and take a look at some of those videos that they have done and trainings that they've done. Michelle Gay is one of the moms from Sandy Hook who lost her daughter Josephine, and they've actually been doing a lot of partnering on with the Jeffco DeAngelis Center. And y'all remember that we had Kevin Carroll, the executive director and former CSSO, retired from Jeffco Schools, and John, and gosh, who else do we have? Tim Reed from Westminster Police. There's a whole bunch of videos and information on the Jeffco DeAngelis Center Foundation website. It's just deangeliscenter.org. Lots of information. Highly recommend that everybody go check that out. They're doing really excellent work, and just the same as we at PTA support our Jeffco Schools Foundation and the Outdoor Lab Foundation, or gosh, you know, all of the other wonderful services for our kids. DeAngelis Center is doing the same amazing work, and we've invited John back. I don't know, did I make you come 3 times last year? And maybe not made you, but every time I ask, you still always say yes. And you do come to, yeah, and all the individual school PTAs. So it's hugely appreciated.
Well, thank you. I will.
Anyone else have questions?
I'll just end with this, and I've got to run. But there is no more important aspect, if you will, or part of a child's life than parents and teachers. So that's where I think it all begins and it all ends. So everything in between is filler and important, but the critical component is frankly all of you and how you're taking care of your kids. So we have to be good partners with you because frankly, kids don't succeed and we don't succeed if we don't do that. So thank you all very much.
Everybody will applaud John, whether it's live or if you want to use your reaction emoji, that's fantastic too. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You are absolutely phenomenal, and we are grateful that you are here in Jeffco. You may not leave ever.
Got a few more years before retirement. Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, thank you all so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.